So imagine staring up at a sheer vertical cliff face in Western Eon.
Oh, yeah. Suspended like hundreds of feet above an ancient desert highway.
Exactly. You are looking at a rock wall,
Hmm.
and carved into that impossible surface is this massive, billboard-sized relief of a king.
And he's surrounded by just thousands upon thousands of tiny wedge-shaped scratches.
Right. And for centuries, the absolute smartest people on Earth looked at those scratches and had absolutely no idea what they meant.
I mean, some thought they were just bird tracks, you know?
Yeah, or like purely decorative borders. Some even thought they were a lost code that humans just simply weren't meant to break.
But today, we're going to look at the exact moment in history when those scratches suddenly started speaking.
Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we are not just looking at a timeline of ancient history. We're looking at how we know what we know.
Right, the mechanics of history.
Exactly. We are exploring a really fascinating set of source materials today, centered around a presentation titled Deciphering the Achaemenids: Art, Geography, and the Philological Quest to Reconstruct the Persian Empire. It's from 1872.
Yeah, we've got a massive stack of notes here. Academic histories, visual reconstructions.
All detailing this massive intellectual leap made in the 19th century. Our mission today is to figure out the sheer mechanics of this resurrection.
And resurrection really is the right word, because when we talk about the Achaemenid Empire...
It's the first Persian Empire, right? Founded by Cyrus the Great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ruled by Darius and Xerxes. We are talking about a superpower that stretched from the Balkans all the way to the Indus Valley.
Massive.
Completely massive, yet its native tongue, Old Persian, was entirely dead.
Okay, let's unpack this. How do you read a language that hasn't been spoken in millennia?
It's a monumental task. You don't have a native speaker to ask.
Right. You don't have a dictionary. So how do you reconstruct the inner workings of an entire sprawling, multi-continental empire from scattered pieces of clay or broken rock inscriptions?
And half-forgotten maps.
Yeah. To answer that, we have to travel back to the year 1872 to St. Petersburg.
Cold, freezing St. Petersburg.
Right. And we need to look at a monumental masterwork published by a scholar named Kaetan Kossowitch.
So Kossowicz's 1872 publication really serves as the absolute pinnacle of 19th century philology.
But to understand what he accomplished, we kind of have to understand the academic void he was working in, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. Prior to the mid-19th century, Old Persian cuneiform, those wedge-shaped marks, were just a complete mystery.
Even when early scholars figured out it was a phonetic script, the translations were just incredibly messy.
Extremely messy. Kossowicz didn't just want to make educated guesses. He wanted to permanently, scientifically fix the reading of these Achaemenid inscriptions.
So there could be no more debate. And the tool he used to do this is something called comparative linguistics. According to our notes, he meticulously cross-referenced the Old Persian cuneiform with two other ancient languages.
Sanskrit and Zend.
Right. But wait, if Old Persian is a dead language, how do Sanskrit and Zend actually help? I mean, they aren't the same language.
They aren't the same language, but they are sister languages.
Oh.
This is the core engine of comparative linguistics. Old Persian, Sanskrit, and Zend, which is just another term for Avestan, an ancient Iranian language, they all share a common, older linguistic ancestor.
The Indo-Iranian branch of the Indo-European language family.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that Kossowicz wasn't just relying on intuition.
He wasn't just guessing.
No, not at all. In the preface to his work, his Prefatio, he explicitly outlines his methodology using the Latin term comparativem.
So he viewed this as a hard science.
Completely. Akin to mathematics.
I'm trying to visualize how that mathematical precision actually works in practice, though.
Well, think of it like genetic sequencing, but for sounds and grammar. Languages evolve in highly predictable ways. Consonants shift, vowels lengthen or shorten according to specific rules over centuries.
So if you have a mystery word in Old Persian.
Right, and you find its direct equivalent, its cognate in Sanskrit, and another equivalent in Zend, you can triangulate the root.
That makes sense.
If both Sanskrit and Zend use a specific grammatical structure for a plural noun, you can mathematically deduce how the Old Persian script was attempting to express that exact same plural.
Even if the vowels aren't written out perfectly in the cuneiform itself.
Exactly.
Right, I was thinking about this earlier. And the best way my brain handles it is by imagining a highly distorted audio recording.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Imagine you find a tape of a song, but it's incredibly muffled. You can barely make out the rhythm, let alone the lyrics.
Yeah, just static and bass.
Right. But you happen to have two completely different cover versions of that exact same song performed by different bands.
Okay, so that's your Sanskrit and your Zend.
Exactly. If you study those two cover versions closely enough and you understand the underlying structure of music theory, you can isolate the chords.
And figure out the original melody of that distorted track.
You can reverse engineer Old Persian.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it. You are using the surviving architecture to rebuild the collapsed original.
Wow.
And for you listening right now, try to put yourself in Kossowicz's shoes. Imagine sitting in a freezing study in St. Petersburg in 1872.
Just surrounded by papers.
Surrounded by these transcriptions of wedges that were impressed into clay over 2,000 years ago.
By the order of a king who ruled the known world.
Right. And by running this mathematical comparative formula, you suddenly realize you are the first person in dozens of centuries to actually pronounce that king's words correctly.
The intellectual thrill of that is just staggering.
It really is.
So Kossowitz locks down the grammar. He proves he can scientifically isolate the sounds in the vocabulary.
Yeah, he cracks the code.
But knowing the grammar of a ghost language doesn't help if your readers can't even agree on what the physical letters are supposed to look like.
Right, the visual aspect.
I'm looking at Kossowicz's workflow here, and I don't entirely get his next obsession. Our sources detail his absolute fixation on the physical font of antiquity, the typography.
Yes. This is where Kossowicz completely breaks away from the scholars who came before him.
How so?
Earlier philologists, specifically a well-known scholar named Friedrich Spiegel, relied on a method called mere transliteration.
Meaning they would look at the ancient wedge shape and say, okay, that makes a B sound, and just print a standard Latin letter B in their books.
Exactly. They would swap out the ancient cuneiform for the equivalent Latin letters.
Okay.
So you're reading a book about Persian history, and the old Persian words are just written out using the same alphabet we use today.
I have to admit, that sounds entirely reasonable to me.
It does, right.
Yeah, if I'm a 19th century student trying to learn this, wouldn't it be 100 times faster for me to just read standard letters?
Rather than staring at completely alien wedge shapes that you have to constantly decode.
Exactly. Why would Kossowitz refuse to do that?
Well, it seems faster on the surface, but Kossowicz argued it was intellectually dangerous.
Dangerous.
Yeah, he vehemently rejected mere transliteration because it creates an illusion of certainty that simply doesn't exist, and it causes massive ambiguities.
How so? I mean, a B is a B.
Not in cuneiform. When you filter a highly complex ancient syllabic script through a modern European alphabet, you inevitably force ancient phonetics into modern boxes where they just do not fit.
Oh, because it's not a one-to-one mapping.
Exactly. Old Persian cuneiform isn't a simple alphabet like ours. A single wedge sign might represent a consonant or a vowel or a consonant-vowel combination depending entirely on the context.
Okay, that changes things.
If a scholar just prints a Latin B, the reader has no idea what specific cuneiform sign was actually on the rock.
So they don't know if the scholar made a mistake in their interpretation.
Right. Kossowicz argued that to truly understand the text, the reader must be confronted with the exact raw visual shape of the original inscription.
Okay, so he institutes this incredibly rigorous three-step workflow for his publication.
A very strict process.
According to the notes, step 1 is the archetype. This means printing the raw cuneiform itself exactly as it appears on the monument.
Yes.
Step 2 is the transcription, which he does using the linguistic norms established by Franz Bopp.
And we should clarify that Franz Bopp was essentially the founding father of Indo-European linguistics.
Okay.
He established the baseline rules for how Sanskrit, Zend, and Greek all related to one another. Kossowicz used Bopp's incredibly strict rules to transcribe the sounds.
And then step 3 is the interpretation. This is where Kossowitz provides the actual meaning, but he does it using strict Latin etymology.
Correct.
But why Latin? Why not Russian or German or French? He was in St. Petersburg, after all.
Well, because in 1872, Latin was still the universal, rigorous language of the academic sciences.
Ah, I see.
By using Latin, Kossowicz avoided the sloppy, shifting colloquialisms of modern European languages.
So it's like a neutral ground.
Exactly. Latin provided a structural, almost mathematical meta-language that allowed him to express the ancient Persian concepts with extreme precision.
That makes total sense. But I want to circle back to step one, the archetype, because the physical reality of what he demanded is just mind-blowing to me.
It is pretty incredible.
To publish this book with the raw cuneiform, he couldn't just open a laptop, go to a word processor, and select a cuneiform font from a drop-down menu.
No, absolutely not. There were no digital fonts.
He had to literally command foundries to forge entirely new metal typefaces.
Yes. Artisans had to painstakingly carve the punches.
They had to strike the copper matrices and cast thousands of tiny lead blocks featuring ancient wedge writing.
Just so Kossowitz could print a book about ancient rocks.
The metallurgical labor alone to bring this book into existence is absurd. It's so much manual labor.
It was a massive undertaking, but for Kossowitz, the medium was an inseparable part of the message.
Really?
Yeah. By recreating those original symbols in metal type, he was doing much more than just being an academic purist. He was respecting the visual authority of the Achaemenid kings.
What do you mean by visual authority?
Well, think about where these inscriptions were found, like the ones at Behistun or Persepolis.
Right, they were carved into mountainsides.
And palace walls. They were meant to be seen as visual projections of imperial power long before anyone ever read the actual words.
Oh, so just the sight of them was supposed to be imposing?
Exactly. The sheer geometry of the cuneiform wedges was intimidating. It looked like the architecture of power.
That's a great way to put it.
By refusing to just sanitize them into a European alphabet, Kossowitz forces his 19th century reader to meet the ancient Persians on their own terms.
You have to look at the jagged, imposing shapes of their language before you are allowed to understand their thoughts.
Precisely.
It's like watching a deeply complex foreign film. If you dub it into English, it's easier to digest, but you lose the original cadence.
You lose the actor's true performance, the cultural rhythm.
Right. Kossowitz is demanding you watch it with the original audio and subtitles, but he's taking it to this extreme industrial level.
That's spot on. And once he had that font cast in lead and his comparative grammar locked in, he could finally begin reading the map of the empire with unprecedented clarity.
He could move from the abstract methodology into the tangible reality of who these people were.
Which is where it gets really fun.
Which brings us to the actual findings. He's got the tools. Now he can look at the borders of the empire.
Yeah.
Our sources detail how linguistic decoding cracked open our understanding of the people living on the extreme edges of the Persian world. Specifically, the Scythians.
Right, the Scythians. In the Old Persian texts, they are referred to as the Saka.
The Saka.
These were incredibly formidable nomadic horse archers who roamed the Eurasian steppe.
Basically, the cowboys of the ancient world.
Basically, they were a constant looming presence on the northern and eastern peripheries of the Achaemenid Empire.
So they were trading partners?
Trading partners, mercenaries, and sometimes deadly enemies. The texts Kossowitch worked on detail two very specific tribes or groups of these Saka.
The first group is called the Hamavarga.
Right.
And the way Kossowitch decodes this specific name is a brilliant example of that comparative linguistics we just talked about. He translates Hamavarga as the Hama-drinking Sakan.
Let's break down how he gets there because it's fascinating. The word is a compound.
Okay.
The first part is Homa, which refers to Hama, a well-known sacred plant in ancient Iranian religion.
And the second part is Varga.
Yes.
Right, and Kossowitch traces that ancient root Varga all the way forward through time to the modern Persian word barg.
And barg means leaf.
So literally, these are the leaf-drinking Scythians.
Exactly. They're consuming an extract from this Hama leaf.
That is so specific. And the second group mentioned in the texts is the Tigrocauda.
The translation for this is even more vivid.
I love this one. It literally means the Saka clothed in pointed hats.
Pointed hats, yes.
See, I love that. Ancient imperial administration can be so dry, but here they aren't logging them as the fierce warriors of the northern steppe.
No, they are literally filing them under the guys wearing the pointy hats.
It is remarkably specific.
But from a historical perspective, that specificity is gold, because this is where the linguistic triangulation becomes a massive triumph.
Okay, how so?
We have the Old Persian word for pointed hats. We also have the Assyrian translations of these exact same royal inscriptions.
Right, because they were multilingual monuments.
Exactly. And the Assyrian word used is karbasti.
Which also means a pointed headpiece.
Yes. And then we cross-reference that with classical Greek literature.
Oh, wow. Triangulation.
If you go to the histories written by Herodotus in the 5th century BC, specifically Book 7, Chapter 64, Herodotus is describing the Persian army.
What does he say?
He explicitly writes that the Scythian contingents wore tall, stiff, upright, pointed caps.
That is incredible. So in 1872, by tracing the etymology of a dead language, Kossowitch isn't just translating a rock.
No.
He is mathematically proving that an ancient Greek historian, an Assyrian scribe, and a Persian stonemason were all looking at the exact same physical reality.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the linguistic evidence proves the classical history is objectively correct.
That's amazing.
But the implications go even further than fashion choices. There is a massive geopolitical theory embedded in these names.
Especially regarding the first group, the Hamavarga, the leaf drinkers.
Right.
Right. This theory comes from another towering figure in our sources, Julius Oppert. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Oppert's brilliant.
He looks at this word, Hama, and he doesn't just see a local Persian bush. He sees a bridge to the Far East.
Oppert recognized that the ancient Persian ritual drink, hama, is linguistically and culturally identical to the ancient Indian ritual drink, soma.
Soma, which is a central element of the oldest Sanskrit texts, the Vedas.
Exactly. Both words originating from the exact same Proto-Indo-Iranian root. It was a profoundly important, highly potent, and likely hallucinogenic plant extract.
Used by priests to commune with the divine.
Yes. So by pinning down the location of the Hamavarga, these leaf-drinking nomads on the eastern edge of the empire, Oppert is suggesting a physical geography for this shared ancient religion.
A single translated word connects the royal court of Persepolis to the nomadic steppes, all the way to the religious drug rituals of ancient India.
It's mind-blowing.
It proves the Persian Empire wasn't a closed ecosystem. It was acutely aware of the massive, diverse cultural networks extending deep into Asia.
It transforms a static list of conquered peoples into a dynamic map of human interaction.
Right.
But if comparative philology can reveal the literal clothes and the drinking habits of the empire's furthest subjects, it raises an even more profound question.
What's that?
What happens when we turn that same linguistic microscope away from the borders and aim it directly at the center?
Wow.
What can it tell us about the deepest inner thoughts, the religious philosophy, and the psychology of the Persian kings themselves?
That is the perfect pivot, because it brings us to the concept of moral satisfaction. If the pointy hats are about the physical reality of the empire, this next part is about the soul of the empire. It revolves around the decoding of one single Old Persian word.
The word is jiyati.
Right. The evolution of how we understand the word jiyati is one of the clearest examples of how a single translation shift can alter our entire perception of an ancient culture.
We need to look at what the sources call the Old Reading.
Okay.
Before Kossowitch, scholars like Spiegel translated jiyati using the German word Wohlbefinden.
And Wohlbefinden essentially translates to well-being or comfort, like having a roof over your head and enough grain in the storehouse.
Right. It's a very utilitarian baseline concept of success.
Just get by.
If a king claims he brings Wohlbefinden to his people, he's basically saying, I keep you fed, I kept the borders secure, you are physically safe.
It implies a society whose highest aspiration is merely surviving the harsh realities of the ancient world.
But Kossowitch looks at that translation and says, no, that's too small, that doesn't fit the context.
And to prove it, he uses what the notes call the Assyrian clue.
The multilingual nature of these imperial monuments is crucial here again.
Because they wrote the same message in multiple languages.
Exactly. The Persian kings wanted everyone to read their edicts, so they often carved the same message in Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian or Assyrian.
So Kossowitch just checked the Assyrian translation.
He looked at how the Assyrian scribes translated this exact same concept, and they didn't use words for simple physical comfort.
What did they use?
They used words like dumku, which translates to joy or goodness, and nusu, which means profound abundance or prosperity.
Oh, wow. That is a big shift.
This pushes Kossowitz toward a radically different synthesis. He realizes the king isn't bragging about keeping people comfortable.
Kossowitch defines jiyati as moral satisfaction.
Yes. He argues it is the ultimate divine gift from the supreme creator god Ahura Mazda bestowed upon humanity.
It is the gift of intelligence, of excellence, of profound spiritual happiness.
It completely separates humanity from the animal kingdom.
Yeah, so.
While animals can experience physical well-being, a well-fed horse has Wohlbefinden.
Right, a happy cow.
Exactly. But only a human being endowed with divine intelligence can experience true moral satisfaction.
I really want you, listening right now, to pause And think about the weight of that distinction in your own life.
It's powerful.
Think about the feeling of just being physically comfortable, sitting on a nice couch, having a full stomach.
Right.
Now compare that to the feeling of profound moral satisfaction you get when you achieve a lifelong goal, or when you act with deep integrity, or when you find true purpose in your work.
Those are universes apart.
They're universes apart. And by applying that distinction to the translation, Kossowitch changed the entire psychological profile of the Achaemenid Empire.
Completely. Under the old translation, you have a primitive warlord society just trying not to starve.
But under Kossowicz's translation, you were looking at a highly advanced, philosophically driven civilization deeply concerned with the human condition.
It tells us that kings like Darius and Xerxes saw their imperial mandate not just as protecting physical bodies, but as stewarding human flourishing.
They believed their empire was the earthly vehicle for divine moral joy.
It makes them philosophers as well as conquerors. It gives them a profound humanity.
But as massive as Kossowicz's strides were, the 19th century academic world was fiercely competitive.
Oh, extremely.
She wasn't operating in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And just as he is putting the finishing touches on this metallurgical linguistic masterpiece, a massive intellectual curveball gets thrown at him.
Forcing him to adapt at the very last possible second.
The timeline here is full of academic drama.
By 1872, Kossowicz's manuscript is essentially complete. The heavy lifting is done.
The cuneiform fonts have been cast.
The Latin etymologies are rigorously checked. The pages are practically ready for the press.
And then the mail arrives in St. Petersburg.
Yeah. The latest edition of the journal Asiatique is published in Paris.
And it contains radical new readings of the most important inscriptions in the Persian Empire, the cliff faces of Behistun and Nakhchi-Rustan.
And these new readings come from Julius Oppert, the brilliant French-German scholar I mentioned earlier with the Scythian geography.
Right, the Soma connection guy.
Exactly. Oppert essentially drops a philological bomb on the community.
So put yourself in Kossowicz's position. Your life's work is locked in. It's ready to go. What do you do when a rival drops research that contradicts your core findings?
This raises an important question about the tension between academic ego and the genuine pursuit of truth.
Yeah.
Think about the overwhelming temptation Kossowicz must have felt to simply ignore Oppert's publication.
I would have. I mean, imagine you spent 3 years working on a massive project for your company.
Right.
You were literally walking into the boardroom to present the final deck, and a colleague from another branch emails you a brilliant, totally new data set that throws half your conclusions out the window.
Oh, the human instinct is to bury that email until after the presentation?
Exactly. Kossowicz could have easily said, Opper's work is too new, it hasn't been peer-reviewed enough, I'm going to press.
He could have protected his monumental effort. But Kossowicz's reaction, as documented in our sources, was cautiously critical.
Meaning he didn't bury it.
He didn't bury the new research. He actually halted the presses and immediately appended Oppert's findings to the end of his own book in a section called the Addendum.
But the notes say he was hesitant about Oppert's methodology. He included it, but he had reservations. Why?
Well, because Oppert was using a very risky technique. Oppert relied heavily on Neo-Persian analogies.
Meaning what?
He was looking at much more modern forms of the Persian language and working backward to guess the ancient cuneiform structures. Kossowicz, as we discussed, was a purist. He relied on strict ancient comparisons with Sanskrit and Zend.
So using modern Persian to translate Old Persian is a bit like trying to translate the works of Shakespeare by looking at modern internet slang.
That's a great comparison. It can give you clues, but it's dangerous.
But despite that methodological disagreement, Kossowicz included it anyway.
He did. He told his readers, here is what Oppert claims. Compare it carefully against the raw cuneiform I've printed for you.
It is the ultimate academic flex of integrity. He prioritized the advancement of human knowledge over his own pride.
It was a remarkably noble decision.
So we have to ask, what exactly was in that addendum? What did Oppert discover that was so groundbreaking it literally stopped the printing presses in Russia?
Oppert unlocked the constitutional and legal foundation of the entire Achaemenid Empire.
Wow.
He provided specific radical corrections to the Behistun inscriptions.
Behistun is the massive cliff face relief we talked about at the very beginning, right?
Right. It is the foundational text of King Darius the Great's reign, where he explains how he defeated usurpers and stabilized the world.
Okay.
Let's look closely at Behistun column 4, line 13.
Before Oppert's 1872 intervention, this specific passage was viewed as a damaged, fragmented mess. Scholars couldn't make heads or tails of the syntax.
But Oppert isolated the cuneiform and offered a clear, stunning, phonetic reading, aperi abistum upariam.
And his translation of that phrase was, I was neither evil nor a liar, nor violent, neither I nor my race. I reigned according to the law.
That phrase, according to the law, is the pivot point of the whole era.
Why is that so crucial?
Oppert had an incredible aha moment with the word abastum. He identified that this old Persian word abasta is the direct etymological root of the word Avesta.
And for anyone who doesn't know, the Avesta is the sacred text. It is the holy prayer book and the legal code of the Zoroastrian religion.
It is the Bible of the ancient Persian world.
Wait, though. How does he get Avesta from Abasta? A B is not a V. How does that linguistic math work?
It's a classic example of a linguistic phenomenon called lenition, or consonant weakening.
Okay.
Over centuries of spoken language, hard consonant sounds often soften to require less effort from the mouth.
That makes sense.
The hard, explosive B sound in Abasta, spoken by ancient Persians, gradually softened over generations into the fricative V sound in Avesta, spoken by later generations.
Oppert understood this sound shift. He realized they were the exact same word.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean for the empire?
By proving that Abasta is the Avesta, Oppert proves that King Darius isn't just making a casual boast about being a benevolent guy.
He's not just saying, I'm a good king.
No. He is stating, for the official imperial record carved in stone, that his absolute terrifying power is actually constrained by a pre-existing sacred moral law.
He reigns according to the Avesta.
Yes.
It completely transforms our understanding of Persian kingship. He's
Yeah.
not just a tyrant doing whatever he wants.
Right.
He's claiming a constitutional limitation.
Yeah.
The king is subject to the sacred law just as the common people are. He declares his legitimacy through his adherence to a universal moral code.
And Oppert carries this theme of legal order even further into another section, Behiston 14.
What does that one say?
This section deals with the scales of justice in the empire. It draws a very sharp dichotomy.
Yeah.
On one hand, dealing with rebels, liars, and traitors, the king says, to these be no friend.
Fair enough.
But on the other hand, regarding those who uphold the imperial order, the text says, those punish according to justice.
Now, I need your help on this next part. The notes say Oppert proved this translation of justice by focusing on the old Persian word rastadi.
Right.
And the linguistic notes specifically mention that this word is placed in the locative case. I haven't taken a grammar class since high school. How does the grammatical case of a word prove that the empire cared about justice?
That's a great question. Think of the locative case, like a grammatical tag that tells you the location or the sphere where an action is happening.
At a physical location.
Usually, yes.
Right.
In English, we use prepositions like in or at to do this, like saying, I am in the house.
Okay.
In highly inflected languages like Old Persian, they change the ending of the word itself to denote that location.
Okay, so how does that apply to an abstract concept like justice? You can't be physically inside justice.
Exactly. But Oppert realized that rastadi wasn't just a noun, meaning justice. Because it was in the locative case, it meant in the realm of justice, or standing within the sphere of the law.
Oh, I see.
The king isn't just handing out generic punishments, he is acting strictly within the boundaries of legal rightness.
That's a huge distinction.
And Oppert proved this by tracing rastadi forward to a modern Persian word, rastad.
And rastad means salary or reward.
Exactly. This is a beautiful example of how language evolves but retains its core conceptual DNA.
Yeah.
Think about the profound journey of that word. An ancient concept for upholding divine justice and acting within the moral order evolves over millennia into a modern word for a literal paycheck.
A reward for right action. It brings these lofty, sky-high concepts of imperial philosophy all the way down to the lived reality of a transaction.
Right.
If you act according to the law, you receive your rasta, your just reward.
It grounds the philosophy.
Which is exactly what we need to do next. Kossowitch and Oppert have locked down the grammar, the sacred laws, and the mind of the king.
They've done the intellectual heavy lifting.
But an empire isn't just a collection of abstract philosophical thoughts floating in the ether. It doesn't exist purely in dictionaries.
No, it exists in physical space.
It commands massive armies, it builds sprawling cities, it extracts taxes. We need to ground these translated texts in literal dirt and clay.
Which brings us to a major shift in our source material, moving away from pure philology and into geography and visual iconography.
Because words need a map.
Exactly. Kossowitch understood that translating a text without understanding its geographic context is only telling half the story.
Right, if you translate a text that says the king marched to the great city, but you have no idea where that city is on a map, the history is useless.
Completely useless.
Earlier explorers had traveled through Iran and brought back this confusing mess of contradictory place names and ruined foundations. Kossowitch knew he had to anchor the language to the earth.
So he included a massive geographic addendum aimed at triangulating the ancient texts with modern topography.
He essentially dropped pins on a map.
He identified the modern city of Shiraz as the vital geographic anchor point in the region. And radiating out from Shiraz, he plotted the exact proximity of the ancient ruins.
He mapped the distance to Persepolis, the great opulent ceremonial capital of the empire.
He mapped the route to Naqsh-i-Rustam, the sheer cliff necropolis where the kings were buried.
And where the crucial royal inscriptions lived, he mapped Pun. By establishing these hard geographic coordinates, he proved to the 19th century academic world that this empire wasn't a myth.
It was a sprawling logistical reality.
And while Kossowitch was mapping the physical heart of the empire in Persia, an incredible archaeological discovery had been made 2 decades earlier that would provide the actual visual faces for the very people Kossowitch was translating.
Right, in 1851.
Far away from Persia, in Magna Graecia, which is modern-day Canusium, Italy archaeologists uncovered the Hypogeum of Canossa.
Let's talk about the scale of this discovery. A hypogeum is an underground tomb.
Our sources describe it as being 24 palms deep beneath the surface and over 5 palms in height, located near the ancient Trajan Arch.
It's massive, and inside this huge underground chamber, they found an absolutely colossal amphora, a clay vessel.
It was covered in 60 intricately painted figures. This vessel, widely known as the Darius vase, is arguably our most vital visual record of the inner workings of the Persian court.
What is truly remarkable about the Canossa vase is its structural composition. It doesn't just show a chaotic battle scene.
It's organized.
Highly organized. It presents a clear, 3-tiered visual hierarchy of the empire's decision-making process, specifically regarding the impending historic war with Greece.
So it's narrative.
Let's dissect these tiers because they perfectly mirror the philosophical structures Kossowitch was translating.
At the very top, you have Tier 1, the divine sphere.
This is where the cosmic stakes are set.
Right. The painting shows the gods Minerva and Jupiter watching over a sorrowful, allegorical female figure who represents the continent of Asia.
She is preparing to march to war. It shows that the conflict is ordained by heaven.
Then you move down to the middle section, Tier 2, the royal court. This is the earthly center of executive power.
We see King Darius sitting in council with his optimates, his highest nobles and advisors.
And because the details are so precise, historians can actually identify the key figures.
Yes, we see Mardonius, the young, aggressive general pushing for conflict. We see the elder statesman, Artaphernes, or perhaps Datis.
And crucially, we see Hippias, the exiled Greek tyrant who fled to Persia, was actively urging Darius to attack Athens.
It's literally a snapshot of a geopolitical war room from 2.5 millennia ago.
And then you get to the bottom, Tier 3, the imperial treasury. Because war isn't free.
Never is.
This bottom tier shows a figure, likely an Ionian tribute collector, tabulating vast sums of money.
He is gathering the physical talents of gold and silver required from the subjugated Asian provinces to actually fund the massive campaign decided upon in Tier 2.
So, on this one single clay vessel, you have the entire anatomy of an imperial action.
You have divine justification at the top, royal executive decision-making in the middle, and the brutal logistical reality of financial taxation at the bottom.
It perfectly visualizes the empire Kossowitch was reading about.
It really does.
Okay, but we have to point out the incredible irony of this artifact.
Oh, the location.
Yes, our absolute best, most detailed visual hierarchy of the inner workings of the Persian court. Their war councils, their highest generals, their treasury, comes from an amphora found in an underground tomb in Italy painted by Greeks.
It is a profound historical irony.
It's wild. It's exactly like trying to learn about the inner workings of an American top-secret situation room at the Pentagon, but the only evidence you have is a highly detailed painting made by a Russian artist during the height of the Cold War.
That's a great way to think about it.
Why were the Greeks in Italy painting Persian tax collectors?
Well, that irony highlights the deep interconnectedness of the ancient Mediterranean and Near Eastern worlds. The Greeks were absolutely terrified of the Persian Empire. It was the existential threat of their era. but they were also deeply obsessed with it.
They couldn't look away.
Exactly. Through trade networks, spies, and shared borders in Ionia, they intimately understood the mechanics of the Persian threat.
They understood it well enough to paint its exact political hierarchy on ceremonial pottery intended for a tomb in Italy.
So we have Kossowicz's physical mapping of the Persian ruins, and we have this Greek visual representation from the Canossa vase. Together, they prove the massive, terrifying reality of the empire.
But it makes me wonder, how did the Persians themselves view their physical legacy over deep time?
What do you mean?
They built these massive stone palaces, but they weren't naive. They knew buildings don't last forever. How did they view their own history?
They possessed a deep awareness of their own mortality, and we find the answer to how they viewed their legacy in the stones of the Apadana.
The Apadana.
The Apadana was the grand, sprawling audience hall in the capital of Persepolis. The roof was supported by massive columns, and the inscriptions carved into the bases of those columns serve as a profound epilogue to our deep dive today.
The notes break the Apadana column inscription down into 3 distinct eras, and it reads less like a royal boast and more like a tragic family narrative.
It really does. Era 1 is the foundation.
The text proudly states that this great palace was originally built by Darius the Serf, who the writer refers to as his great-grandfather.
But the inscription doesn't stop with the glory of the foundation. It moves into Era 2, which is destruction.
Oh.
The text frankly admits that under the rule of Artaxerxes I, the grandfather, a catastrophe struck. The magnificent Apadana was devoured by flames. It burned to the ground.
Wow, they actually admitted that on the monument.
Yeah.
And finally, we get to Era 3, Resurrection.
Right.
The current king who is carving the stone, Artaxerxes II, writes that by the grace of the gods, he has rebuilt the palace anew.
And he leaves a direct, almost pleading invocation at the end.
What does he say?
He asks for the protection of the supreme god Ahura Mazda, the goddess Anahit, and the god Mithra against any future disaster. He says, "May they protect me from all disaster and all that I have built."
What is so incredibly profound about this takeaway is that these imperial inscriptions are not just isolated, static moments frozen in time.
No, they aren't just a king bragging about winning a single battle.
They act as a continuous, multi-generational dialogue written directly onto the structural supports of the palaces themselves.
The kings are literally speaking to their ancestors, openly acknowledging their family's failures, like the grand palace burning down on their grandfather's watch and speaking to the gods, hoping to somehow protect the fragile future.
It deeply humanizes these incredibly imposing figures.
It really does.
It reminds me of how modern nations handle tragedy. Think about the cornerstone of a rebuilt government building today. Think about the rebuilding of the Pentagon after 9/11 or the Freedom Tower at the World Trade Center. The plaques there don't just say, "Look at this great new building." They explicitly acknowledge the terrible fire, the destruction of the past, and they frame the new construction as an act of resilience and a prayer for future peace.
It's imperial power, yes, but it's also just raw human resilience written in stone.
And that multi-generational dialogue is exactly what 19th century scholars like Kossowitch and Oppert tapped into.
By deciphering the language, they didn't just read history, they joined that ongoing dialogue.
Which brings us to the grand synthesis of our deep dive. When we look back at what our sources call the 19th century synthesis, we see how all these incredibly disparate threads were finally woven together in 1872.
You have Kossowitch and Oppert providing the philology and the law.
Through the mathematical precision of comparative linguistics, they decoded the moral and administrative voice of the king.
They gave us the profound psychology of ayati moral satisfaction. They linked the absolute power of the monarch to the sacred constraints of the Avesta and grounded justice in the concept of restati.
And simultaneously, Kossowicz's geographic mapping pinned those abstract texts to the actual physical earth.
Locating the Scythians and the royal capitals.
And art and iconography, like the Darius vase of Canossa, gave us the exact visual hierarchy and the very faces of the Persian war room.
Words forged in metal type, paintings fired on clay, and coordinates plotted on a map all merged to bring the ancient world back to life for the modern age.
For anyone listening, I think the ultimate lesson here is a reflection on both the sheer fragility and the astonishing resilience of human information.
Palaces burned to the ground, empires that ruled the world vanish into dust.
Entire languages die, and the sounds of millions of voices are entirely forgotten.
Yet because a king demanded his laws be carved into a sheer rock cliff, and because scholars thousands of years later refused to give up until they could mathematically reverse engineer those scratches, the deepest thoughts of the past survived.
And that leaves us with a provocative thought to end on today. Think about our world right now. Think about the digital footprint we are leaving behind.
Oh, that's a scary thought.
Thousands of years from now, when future scholars try to reconstruct our 21st century empire, they aren't going to have massive stone cliff faces and baked clay tablets to read.
No, they will have decaying server farms, corrupted hard drives, and broken lines of code in languages that no longer exist.
If 19th century linguists had to literally invent new metallurgical processes and forge metal typefaces just to read old Persian rock carvings, what impossible, unimaginable tools will future scholars have to invent just to read our digital, multi-generational dialogue?
Will our pursuit of moral satisfaction be as clearly recorded and as carefully reconstructed as King Darius's?
Thank you for exploring the foundations of ancient knowledge with us. Until next time.